The great crystal halls of the Stellar Alliance headquarters had never felt so cold. Elder Tom stood at the massive window, his four-fingered hand pressed against the transparent surface as he watched the ships come and go in the eternal dance of interstellar traffic. But today, the dance seemed slower, heavier with the weight of recent news. Behind him, the council chamber buzzed with worried voices. 12 of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy sat around the circular table, each representing a different advanced civilization. Their usual calm was gone, replaced by fear that even their centuries of diplomatic training couldn't hide. "The numbers don't lie," said head scientist Ray, his blue skin pale with worry as he projected the latest data into the center of the room. "The plague has already infected 4 outer colonies. Our best estimates give us 5 years before it reaches all our worlds." The hologram showed red dots spreading across the star map like a deadly infection. Each dot represented billions of lives at risk. The plague was unlike anything they'd seen before. It targeted the very genetic structure that all Alliance species shared, a result of their common evolutionary path. Elder Tom turned away from the window, his aged face showing the wisdom of 300 years. "Have we tried everything?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The Alliance had the most advanced medical technology in known space. Their doctors could rebuild entire bodies, transfer consciousness, and cure diseases that once wiped out whole planets. But this was different. "Our immune systems are too perfect," Ray explained, running a hand through his silver hair. "We engineered out all flaws centuries ago. Now we're too specialized, too clean. This plague," he paused, swallowing hard, "it's using our perfection against us." The room fell silent. Generations of advancement, of pushing their species to the peak of evolution, had left them vulnerable. Their immune systems were like perfect machines, efficient but inflexible. Tom walked slowly to his seat, his mind racing through centuries of historical data he'd studied. There was something, a memory from his early days as a junior historian, about a species that took a different path. "What about the humans?" he asked suddenly. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Elder Green, her plant-like appendages swaying with agitation, spoke first. "The primitive species from the 3rd planet of the Sol system. They haven't even unified their world government properly." "Exactly," Tom said, his eyes lighting up. "They're primitive by our standards. They still get sick. They still fight diseases the old way. Their bodies are full of what they call junk DNA, leftover code from countless battles with diseases over millions of years." Ray's eyes widened as he understood. "You think their primitive immune systems might be the key, but they're so far behind us. They still use chemical medicines. They can't even regrow limbs." Tom stood up, his voice growing stronger. "That's exactly why we need them. Look at our situation. All our advanced medicine has failed. Maybe we need a different approach. Maybe we need a species that still remembers how to fight the old battles." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members were outraged at the suggestion of asking primitives for help. Others, seeing the red dots spreading across their star maps, were willing to try anything. "The humans are dangerous," warned Elder Green. "They still wage wars. They pollute their planet. They're unpredictable." "They're survivors," Tom countered. "Their medical history shows they've faced and beaten countless plagues. Their bodies are archives of survival strategies we engineered out of ourselves centuries ago." The debate raged for hours, but as more reports of the plague's spread came in, even the strongest opponents began to waver. Finally, Elder Tom called for a vote. "We can maintain our pride and watch our people die," he said, looking at each council member in turn, "or we can humble ourselves and ask for help from those we once dismissed as primitive. The choice is ours." The vote was close, but in the end, desperation won over pride. As Tom watched the council members file out of the chamber, he looked once more at the busy space lanes outside. Soon, those lanes would carry Alliance ships to Earth, not to observe or study, but to beg for help. The humans were about to get a very interesting call. The morning started like any other at the Global Space Defense Center in Colorado. Controllers watched their radar screens, satellites tracked space debris, and coffee machines worked overtime. Nobody expected that humanity's first contact with alien life would happen during the quiet morning shift. That changed when 12 massive ships appeared just beyond the moon's orbit. "Sir, you need to see this." Controller Mike stared at his screen, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. The ships were unlike anything in their database, smooth, silvery craft that seemed to glow with their own light. Within minutes, every major leader on Earth was connected to an emergency video call. The ships hadn't moved, hadn't threatened. They just waited, broadcasting the simple message in perfect English. "We come seeking help. We mean no harm." 6 hours later, in the hastily prepared United Earth Council chamber, humans faced aliens for the first time. The room was packed with world leaders, top scientists, and military commanders. Security teams stood nervously around the walls, their weapons feeling strangely inadequate against visitors who could cross light years. Elder Tom led the Alliance delegation. Despite his alien appearance, tall, silver-skinned, with four-fingered hands, his eyes showed something universally recognizable: desperation. "We apologize for surprising you," Tom began, his voice translated smoothly by a small device at his throat. "But our need is great, and time is short." The room listened in stunned silence as Tom explained their situation. He told them about the plague, about their failing advanced medicine, about their dying worlds. As he spoke, Dr. Jack Miller, Earth's leading expert in infectious diseases, leaned forward with growing interest. "Let me get this straight," Jack said, running a hand through his graying hair. "You engineered your immune systems to be perfect, and now they can't adapt to a new threat." "Correct," said Ray, the Alliance's head scientist. "Our bodies are too specialized. We eliminated unnecessary genetic code, removed redundant systems. We thought we were creating perfection." Jack couldn't help but smile. "You know what we call unnecessary genetic code here on Earth. Our backup plans." He pulled out his tablet and displayed human DNA sequences. "See all this mess? This junk DNA. It's full of old viral codes, ancient immune responses, backup systems for our backup systems. We're messy, redundant, and full of evolutionary leftovers, and that might just save you." The Alliance members looked at the human genetic data with new interest. Where they saw chaos, they began to understand they were seeing survival written in genetic code. "How quickly can you help?" Tom asked, hope creeping into his voice for the first time. The world leaders looked at each other. This was humanity's moment. First contact, advanced technology, and a chance to save multiple civilizations. But it was also a risk. Could they trust these aliens? Should they? President Adams stood up, her decision made. "We'll need to verify everything you've told us, but if you're telling the truth, we'll help." That's what humans do. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The Alliance provided data about the plague. Human scientists started preliminary analysis. Regular people around the world watched their TVs and phones in amazement as the news spread. Aliens were real, and they needed humanity's help. In his lab, now reinforced with Alliance medical equipment, Dr. Miller looked at the first samples of the plague through a microscope. His team gathered around, eager to begin work. "Look at this," he said, adjusting the focus. "Their plague is nasty, but it's not unbeatable. You know what it reminds me of? The Spanish flu, mixed with a bit of HIV. We've seen things like this before." He straightened up and looked at his team, excitement in his eyes. "They spent centuries running away from disease. We spent that time learning to fight it. Now let's show them how humans handle a plague." Outside the lab, the massive Alliance ships hovered in orbit, visible to anyone who looked up at the night sky. They were a reminder that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their so-called primitive medical knowledge might just save the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The race against time had begun. 2 weeks had passed since first contact, and Dr. Miller's lab had become a strange mix of human and alien technology. Advanced holographic displays showed DNA structures floating in the air, while next to them sat ordinary microscopes and test tubes. It was in this mix of old and new that humanity's greatest advantage began to emerge. "You're not going to believe this," Dr. Miller said, looking up from his microscope. The Alliance scientists Ray and his assistant Ben crowded around, their silver skin reflecting the lab's bright lights. "We've been testing blood samples from different human populations, and it's amazing." He pointed to a screen showing various blood samples. "Look at this one. It's from a woman whose ancestors survived the Black Death in medieval Europe. And this one's from a man whose family lived through multiple cholera outbreaks in Asia. Each sample shows different natural resistances." Ray's eyes widened. "But how is this possible? The samples are from different regions, different diseases." "That's the beauty of it," Miller smiled, pulling up more data. "Humans never tried to perfect our immune system. We just kept building on what worked. Every plague, every disease, left its mark in our DNA. We're walking history books of disease resistance." In the next room, other human scientists were making their own discoveries. Dr. Anna Jones, a specialist in bacterial research, burst into the main lab, her eyes bright with excitement. "The gut bacteria," she shouted, waving a tablet. "Our messy, complicated gut bacteria might be the key." The Alliance scientists looked confused. They had eliminated most bacteria from their bodies centuries ago, considering them primitive and unnecessary. Dr. Jones explained as she pulled up her findings on the main screen. "Human gut bacteria are constantly fighting, evolving, and adapting. They're like tiny warriors training for battle every day." She pointed to several readings. "Look what happened when we exposed them to the plague samples. Some of them actually started producing compounds that attack the plague." Ray sat down heavily in a nearby chair, his professional calm cracking. "You mean the bacteria you still carry inside you, the ones we removed from our bodies? They might save us." "Exactly." Miller joined in. "Your people tried to create the perfect immune system by removing everything you thought was unnecessary. But we humans kept all our messy backup systems. Sometimes the best defense isn't a perfect wall. It's having 1,000 imperfect solutions working together." The lab burst into activity as more tests confirmed their findings. Human blood samples were showing natural resistance. Modified gut bacteria were producing promising compounds. Even human junk DNA was revealing ancient viral defenses that could be adapted to fight the plague. Later that evening, Miller sat in his office, looking at side-by-side comparisons of human and Alliance immune systems. Where the Alliance immune system was like a perfectly engineered machine, the human system looked like a chaotic battlefield where different types of cells fought in seemingly random ways. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Elder Tom had quietly entered the office. "We sought perfection in simplicity. You found strength in complexity." Miller nodded. "Your people aren't wrong to advance medicine. But sometimes the old ways have value too. Look here." He pointed to a particular DNA sequence. "This bit of code helped us fight off a virus thousands of years ago. We thought it was just taking up space, but it might be exactly what we need to fight your plague." Tom placed a four-fingered hand on Miller's shoulder. "When we first found Earth, we dismissed humans as primitive because you still got sick, still had to fight diseases. We never considered that fighting those battles made you stronger." Outside the lab, the sun was setting. News channels worldwide were reporting on the progress being made. Ordinary people were donating blood samples, offering their unique genetic histories to help save alien civilizations. Humanity's primitive medical knowledge, maintained through countless generations of fighting disease, was becoming the galaxy's best hope. The cure wasn't ready yet, but for the first time since the plague began, real hope existed. Sometimes, it turned out, the best way forward was to remember the lessons of the past. The emergency alert came at 3 a.m. Earth time. Dr. Miller was still in his lab when the holographic display lit up with a priority message from the Alliance. The Proxima colony had fallen to the plague. 10 million dead in a week. "Show me the latest numbers," Miller demanded, his voice rough from too much coffee and too little sleep. The lab's screens filled with data from across the galaxy. Red dots were spreading faster now. The plague was accelerating. Ray appeared at the lab's door, his silver skin looking dull with exhaustion. 3 more worlds have reported first infections. Our people are starting to panic. The human scientists had been working non-stop for weeks. Their lab had become a strange mix of cutting-edge Alliance technology and what the aliens considered primitive human equipment. Petri dishes sat next to quantum scanners. Simple microscopes worked alongside holographic displays. "Get everyone in here," Miller said, rubbing his tired eyes. "We need to try something different." Within minutes, the main lab was packed. Human scientists stood shoulder to shoulder with their alien counterparts. The room buzzed with a mix of languages, all translated by the Alliance's devices. "Look at what we're doing wrong," Miller said, pointing to their failed attempts at a cure. "We're thinking too much like the Alliance. Too clean, too perfect." He pulled up images of human immune responses. "We need to think messy. Think human." Dr. Anna Jones stepped forward, holding up a simple Petri dish. "I've been growing cultures the old way, like we did before we had fancy equipment. And look at this." She placed the dish under a basic microscope and displayed the image on the main screen. The room fell silent. In the dish, human gut bacteria were actively fighting the plague, creating protective zones where the deadly virus couldn't survive. "Sometimes the old ways work best," she said with a tired smile. "We've been so focused on high-tech solutions that we forgot about the basics." The lab split into teams, each taking a different approach. Some worked with blood samples from human populations that had survived historic plagues. Others focused on modifying gut bacteria. A few even studied ancient human remedies, looking for forgotten knowledge that might help. Hours turned into days. The scientists barely slept, driven by reports of more colonies falling to the plague. Elder Tom visited often, bringing news from the Alliance Council and watching the humans work with growing amazement. "Your people are remarkable," he told Miller during one late-night visit. "You don't give up. You try everything, no matter how unlikely it seems." Miller was looking at a failed test result, his frustration visible. "We have to succeed. Those are real people dying out there. Human or alien doesn't matter. They need our help." The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. A young lab assistant named Bill was experimenting with what the Alliance considered an obsolete technique, using weakened virus strains to trigger immune responses. "Dr. Miller." Bill's shout cut through the quiet lab. "I think I found something." The entire team gathered around his station. Bill had combined modified human gut bacteria with a weakened plague strain. When exposed to infected Alliance blood samples, the combination didn't just fight the plague. It taught the Alliance's engineered immune systems how to fight back. "It's like," Bill struggled to explain, "like we're teaching their perfect immune systems how to be imperfect, how to adapt." Miller stared at the results, his hands shaking slightly. "Run it again," he ordered. "Run it 10 times. Run it 100 times. We need to be sure." As the tests ran, hope began to grow. Each result showed the same thing. They had found a way to help the Alliance's immune systems remember how to evolve and adapt. The solution wasn't in creating something perfect. It was in teaching their bodies how to be imperfect again. Outside the lab, the sun was rising. Another day in the race against time was beginning. But for the first time, the humans weren't just fighting the plague. They were winning. The lab was absolutely silent as Dr. Miller loaded the final test results onto the main screen. 50 human scientists and 10 Alliance members held their breath. They'd been working for this moment for months. 98% effectiveness, Miller announced, his voice trembling slightly. Across all tested Alliance species, the room erupted in cheers. Dr. Anna Jones hugged Ray, not caring about protocol with alien visitors anymore. Bill, the young lab assistant who had helped find the breakthrough, sat down heavily in his chair, tears in his eyes. "Show me again," Elder Tom requested, stepping closer to the display. "Show me how humans solved what our most advanced computers couldn't." Miller brought up the detailed reports. "It's actually pretty simple," he said. "We took 3 things you'd eliminated from your body centuries ago: gut bacteria, junk DNA, and random mutations. We combined them into what we're calling a primitive protocol." He pulled up microscope images showing the cure in action. The modified gut bacteria teach your immune systems how to adapt again. The junk DNA we inserted gives your body's backup defense plans, and we deliberately left room for random mutations so your immune systems can keep evolving to fight new threats. Ray shook his head in amazement. "You turned back our biological clock. Made us messier." "Exactly." Anna joined in. "Perfect isn't always better. Sometimes you need backup plans for your backup plans." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The cure needed to be mass-produced, and quickly. But here again, humans surprised their alien visitors. "You want to make it where?" Ray asked, not sure he'd heard correctly. "Beer breweries," Miller replied with a grin. "They're perfect. They already have the fermentation tanks we need, clean rooms, and temperature control systems. We can convert them to produce the modified bacteria within days." Elder Tom looked confused. "But those are primitive facilities." "Primitive facilities that have been making things safely for hundreds of years," Miller explained. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The plan was put into action immediately. Breweries around the world stopped making beer and started producing the cure. The Alliance provided faster-than-light ships to distribute it. Human scientists trained alien medical teams in what they called old-school medical techniques. In the lab's break room, Miller found Elder Tom staring out the window at the brewery across the street, now converted into a cure production facility. "When we first detected Earth," Tom said quietly, "we almost passed you by. Our scans showed a planet full of disease, conflict, and imperfect beings. We thought you were too primitive to be worth contacting." Miller poured 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Tom. The alien had grown fond of the bitter human drink. "Perfect can be the enemy of good," Miller said. "Every disease we fought made us stronger. Every challenge taught us something new. We kept the old knowledge while gaining new knowledge. And now that old knowledge has saved us," Tom replied, sipping his coffee, "the Alliance has already begun changing our medical practices. We're restoring some of the genetic diversity we engineered away. Some of our people are even asking to have their gut bacteria restored." The first reports were already coming in from worlds receiving the cure. The plague wasn't just being stopped, it was being completely eliminated. Alliance immune systems, taught by human science to be imperfect again, were actually becoming stronger than before. "You know what the best part is," Miller said, watching workers load crates of the cure into an Alliance transport. "This isn't just about saving your people. Every challenge makes us all stronger, humans and Alliance, learning from each other." Outside, the sun was setting on another busy day. The brewery's lights were on, its fermentation tanks now working to save an alien civilization. It was a perfect example of what humanity did best: finding simple solutions to complex problems, using whatever tools were available. The plague that had threatened to destroy the most advanced civilization in the galaxy was being defeated by the very things they had thought primitive. Sometimes, it turned out, the best way forward was to take a step back. The massive Alliance transport ship looked strangely at home next to the old cargo aircraft at Kennedy Space Center. Workers in spacesuits and regular work uniforms moved together in an organized dance, loading crates of the cure onto both types of vessels. Earth had become the center of the largest medical relief effort in galactic history. Dr. Miller stood watching from the control tower, Elder Tom beside him. Screens showed similar scenes playing out at spaceports and breweries around the world. Humanity had transformed its beer-making and medical facilities into production centers for the galaxy's salvation. First shipment just landed on New Genesis, reported Ray through the communication system. The Alliance scientist was coordinating deliveries from orbit. Recovery rate is even better than our tests showed. 99% effectiveness. The news triggered another round of cheers in the control room. Each successful delivery meant millions of lives saved. But there was no time to celebrate long. More ships were waiting to be loaded. "You've done something remarkable," Tom said, watching the human pilot and Alliance crew guide their ship into position. "Not just creating the cure, but delivering it so quickly." Miller nodded. "We've had practice. Every time Earth faced a pandemic, we learned how to distribute medicine faster, reach more people, work more efficiently. Your ships make it easier. But the basic principles are the same ones we used to deliver smallpox vaccines hundreds of years ago." Down on the landing field, an interesting mix of technology was making history. Alliance anti-gravity lifts worked alongside human forklifts. Advanced alien medical containers were packed with cure doses made in converted beer tanks. Earth's primitive mass production methods were saving the most advanced civilization in known space. Report from the Centauri colonies, called out Controller Mike from his station. First wave of treatments complete. Plague infection rates dropping to 0 within days. The news feeds showed similar stories from across Alliance space. Worlds that had been on the brink of disaster were recovering. Hospitals were emptying. The plague that had threatened to wipe out the most advanced species in the galaxy was being defeated by what they had once considered primitive medicine. But the humans weren't done surprising their alien visitors. "Your people keep giving more than we ask for," Tom said, watching another ship take off. "The cure would have been enough, but your doctors are teaching our medical teams, sharing centuries of experience fighting diseases." "Knowledge wants to be shared," Miller replied. "Every doctor knows that. Besides, the more we share, the stronger we all become." The Alliance was learning fast. Their advanced medical systems were being redesigned to include what they now called human backup protocols. Their doctors were studying Earth's long history of disease response. Some Alliance citizens were even requesting transplants of human gut bacteria, wanting the extra protection it provided. As the sun began to set, a new kind of ship landed at Kennedy. It wasn't a medical transport. It was an Alliance diplomatic vessel. "The Council has voted," Tom announced, reading the message on his device. "Earth is being offered full membership in the Stellar Alliance, not as a primitive world to be uplifted, but as equals." As teachers. Miller watched the diplomatic ship land, its silver hull reflecting the orange sunset. "Will your people accept that? Being taught by primitives." Tom laughed, a sound he'd learned from his time among humans. "After this, nobody in the Alliance will ever use the word primitive as an insult again. You've shown us that the old ways have value, that sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one." Another wave of ships was arriving for loading. The work would continue through the night, as it had for weeks. But now the urgency of desperation had been replaced by the enthusiasm of success. Humanity's first major role in galactic society wasn't about showing off advanced technology or military might. Instead, they had saved the galaxy by sharing their long experience of fighting disease, surviving plagues, and never forgetting the lessons learned along the way. As Miller headed back to check on the production facilities, he smiled. Sometimes the best way to move forward was to remember where you came from. 1 year after first contact, the Grand Hall of the Stellar Alliance looked very different. Among the sleek, silver-skinned Alliance members sat a delegation of humans, their presence marking a historic change in galactic society. Dr. Miller, now Earth's chief medical ambassador, couldn't help but smile at how much had changed. "The final report from the plague response is ready," Elder Tom announced to the gathered representatives. The holographic displays showed a galaxy map, but now instead of red dots marking infection zones, green lights showed recovered worlds. "Thanks to human intervention," Tom continued, "not only has the plague been eliminated, But our civilizations are stronger than ever. Our medical knowledge has grown more in 1 year than in the previous century. Miller watched as images appeared in the air above the council table. Alliance doctors working alongside human physicians, studying Earth's medical history, learning what they called primitive wisdom. Some Alliance worlds had even started building their own old-style research labs, combining advanced technology with simpler, proven methods. But perhaps our greatest lesson, Tom said, his voice carrying through the hall, wasn't medical at all. It was about pride and the danger of believing that newer always means better. The Alliance's constitution was displayed in the air, its text glowing softly. A new section had been added. No species shall be judged by their level of technological advancement alone, for wisdom comes in many forms. Ray, now head of the new Human Alliance Medical Exchange Program, stood up to speak. We thought we had reached the peak of evolution. We engineered away what we saw as flaws, eliminated randomness, sought perfection. He smiled at the human delegation. The humans showed us that sometimes our flaws are our strengths. That backup systems, redundancy, and even illness can make us stronger. Around the galaxy, things were changing. Alliance worlds were restoring genetic diversity to their populations. Their perfect engineered immune systems were being modified to include what they now called human adaptability factors. Some had even started small-scale farming of beneficial bacteria, learning from Earth's long experience with probiotics. Earth has changed too, Miller added when it was his turn to speak. We've learned from the Alliance. Their technology has helped us fight diseases we've struggled with for centuries, but we're keeping our old knowledge too. The best future comes from remembering the lessons of the past. The screen showed images from Earth, advanced Alliance medical equipment in hospitals sitting alongside traditional tools, doctors using both new and old techniques, research labs where human and alien scientists work together, combining their knowledge. A young Alliance medical student raised her hand. But what happens when the next plague comes? When we face a new threat? Miller exchanged glances with Tom before answering. Then we'll face it together. Human adaptability and Alliance technology. New knowledge and old wisdom. We're stronger together than apart. The council chamber filled with approving murmurs. On a nearby screen, a news report showed the old brewery that had helped save the galaxy. It was now a combined Human Alliance Medical Research Center, its ancient brick walls housing both fermentation tanks and quantum computers. The humans have a saying. Tom addressed the council one last time. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We had become too specialized, too focused on one path of advancement. The humans reminded us that there's strength in diversity, in keeping multiple options open. As the session ended, Miller stood by the grand window where Tom had once watched ships with desperate hope. Now he watched vessels from Earth and the Alliance coming and going peacefully, carrying medicines, knowledge, and hope across the stars. You know what the best part is? He said to Tom, who had joined him. This is just the beginning. Imagine what we can achieve now that we're working together. Outside, the galaxy spun on, filled with countless civilizations, each with their own wisdom to share. The age of thinking in terms of primitive and advanced was over. A new era had begun, built on the understanding that true wisdom comes in many forms, and every species has something valuable to teach. The humans had saved the Alliance not just with their medicine, but with their reminder that sometimes the old ways are the best ways.